Welcome to the Castle of Spirits podcast, episode number 11. This is the companion podcast to the long-running castleofspirits.com website, and now YouTube channel.
Ooh, what did you say?
And now YouTube channel.
We have a YouTube channel?
That's right.
And they'll give those to anybody.
And your name is Jane.
I am. I'm the Ghost Keeper Jane.
And what's my name? And my name is Vince. We're pleased to be here. A week removed from our latest and greatest special 10th episode, which was the Ouija board special.
Mm-hmm. And we're not going to top that, man.
In any case, we are gathered here tonight to share scary stories.
Tell us more about that YouTube channel, actually, before we get busy.
Well, we decided to...
basically blanket the world in our podcast.
Right. Wherever there's a blanket needed, there's a podcast that's...
What?
Wherever there's a blanket needed... What was it?
What was it?
I don't know. I don't know what I'm talking about. So we have taken these episodes, purely audio, and added captivating imagery.
For ambiance.
And we have placed it on YouTube. Basically, youtube.com/@castleofspirits.com.
One more time. That's youtube.com/the @Castle of Spirits.
Oh, not .com? Okay.
No, you don't need .com in there twice. Man, you're old.
Wow.
So we're actually setting the mood for ourselves tonight while we record this episode by playing our own podcast on the big screen TV. On mute, of course, but we have a glorious campfire warming our room. It's not warming our room.
Well, it is a castle and it's very drafty, so it needs all the warmth it can get.
Just looking at it feels warm.
It does, doesn't it?
Anyway, the people actually came here for true paranormal ghost stories. Well, true paranormal stories of any ilk. And we have a few.
We have thousands of them.
Thousands of them.
Hey, if you guys like creepy, true ghost stories, paranormal stories, go to castleofspirits.com, go to the library, and sort through 25 years of reader-submitted ghost stories.
We've got a funky, fresh search feature. Whatever you have a hankering for, pop it into the old search feature, and it'll come up.
You want some old hag?
Just search hag. There she is.
You want some Bigfoot?
Boom. We got you covered. You just want to see every story ever released in the month of November? Just select November and hit search.
And that gives you everything from 97 to 22?
All of it.
Wow.
So did you use our handy search feature and find yourself a story to read to the good folks today?
I did, in fact.
Ooh.
I got it in my head that I wanted to hear some Banshee stories.
Nice.
So
I do love a good Banshee.
So I went to castleofspirits.com, I searched Banshee, and I found a story called, appropriately enough, Banshee Encounter, dated March 2013, submitted by Anonymous in Dublin, Ireland.
Ooh. I think my story is from the UK, from Wales. So we are very European today.
International. Intercontinental.
Why don't you go ahead and read your story first?
All right, check it out. Banshee Encounter. Now, this is going to require a little bit of
imagination.
Suspension of disbelief.
Oh.
And you'll understand why with the opening line. When I was a little girl, about 9, my father used to frighten me by telling me stories about the Banshee.
That's a good father. I'm not saying that sarcastically. I think
everybody needs a father that can tell them about the Banshee.
And terrifying stories in general, yes.
He had his own personal encounters, which he was telling me about as well. So one fine night, he went on to tell me about the Banshee, and I thought it was totally fake. Well, I was wrong. A few nights after those stories, I had already forgotten everything and all was well. It was in the middle of the night when I was fast asleep in my bed, and I was awakened to a piercing wail.
Kind of forgive the pun, the calling card of the Banshee.
Oh, there you go.
Sorry.
It was a cry that I had never, ever heard before. Being brave, I crept over to my window and peered through the curtains. An old woman with pure white hair down to her bottom was perched on the swing of our swing set in the back garden. She was running her fingers through her hair as she wailed. I froze in terror. I wanted to look away, yet I was too in awe to do so. I screamed for my mother and my father, but I kept my eyes glued to the woman sitting on my swing. My father burst through the door and ran over to me, asking why I was up out of bed and looking outside. He spun me around so I was making direct eye contact with him, and he took my hand and walked me to his room. As I walked with him, I looked back, and the woman on the swing had vanished. I started to cry even harder due to the fact that I was even more freaked out now. I crawled under the sheets of my parents' bed, and my mother and father soothed me. The next morning, my father found out that our neighbor's son had passed away in their house that night.
Oh.
My mother and father had heard it as well, but they didn't want to tell me that what I'd heard was actually the Banshee.
That is so scary.
And that was, again, Banshee Encounter by Anonymous in Dublin, Ireland, March 2013.
Yeah, banshees are one of those things that have always creeped me out. Just the word banshee is terrifying.
Well, I know that there's a saying that, like a banshee wail or
screaming like a banshee.
But what exactly is a banshee? Do you know? I realize that even though the word is very triggering to me, I don't really know what it means or what is behind the word.
Okay, so on Wikipedia, I have the article about banshees, and we will include it in the show notes. And if you are listening on YouTube, it's in the video description below. So a banshee is a woman of the fairy mound, or a fairy woman. And it's a female spirit in Irish folklore who heralds the death of a family member, usually by screaming, wailing, shrieking, or keening.
Oh, okay. So that makes sense. The neighbor's son had died that night.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know this.
And it was interesting when you said you had a banshee story. I thought, I bet it's not from Ireland, because I think banshee is kind of one of those words that's just, a lot of people use it for ghost. If there's a ghost of a woman, people say it's a banshee. Or if they hear a voice, like some kind of a scream somewhere, they say it's a banshee. But then when you said it was actually from Ireland, I was like, oh, this is going to be a legit banshee story, because I know that that's where the banshee comes from, is Irish folklore. So yeah, it looks like a pretty long article. Yeah, the long streaming hair and some kind of creepy art of banshees, like this one it says the banshee appears from 1862. Look at that one.
All right, let me check it out. Oh man, this is great.
Yeah.
The banshee appears, and you see a couple of...
Looks like police officers, right?
A couple of fine gentlemen. They look like they could be constables of some sort with their top hats. And in the distance, what looks to be, it's a black and white.
Yeah, it looks like some kind of a wood carving.
And in the background, the figure of a woman, arms upraised, hair flowing behind her, possibly screaming.
I mean, it's a banshee, so I'm going to assume she's screaming.
Let's pinch and zoom on the banshee. Oh, yep, she's screaming, all right. I've seen enough. Here you go.
So do make sure you check out the Wikipedia article. It's got some really interesting information and images in it. But yeah, I do love me a good banshee story, Vince. That was great. So why did you choose that one? Any reason in particular?
I don't know. It's just a word that, even though up until now I wasn't really educated on what it was, it's a word that's always freaked me out.
Yeah, it's a creepy word. So I just have to say, because it's very timely, there is that movie out right now called Banshees of, I'm probably going to say it so wrong. What is it? Inisherin?
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Okay. That when I first saw the adverts for that, I thought, ooh, that sounds exciting. Banshees and, that lot. But then I saw that it's not like it's not like a horror movie or a scary movie. And then I saw reviews about it that it was a really good movie, but it was really sad. So I'm probably going to pass on that one for now. But I was a little disappointed to find out that it wasn't like a ghost movie.
I think In Bruges is about as that was the same makers, the same cast.
Yeah.
And I think that's about as deep into that sorrow as I'm willing to
yeah,
get.
Yeah, that was a sucker punch enough. So I don't need another one. So if anyone else has seen this movie and I'm wrong and it really is a ghost movie and it is worth watching and it's not, rip your guts out and, make you cry for 8 days like a banshee, then, drop us a note in the lounge at castleofspirits.com/lounge and let us know and maybe we'll watch it.
And if you yourself have experienced an actual banshee, or know someone who has,
or if you yourself are a banshee.
Oh yeah, if you're a banshee also, you can submit your own story.
Yeah.
To castleofspirits.com.
Tell us about a time you scared somebody.
/submit and tell us your story and we'll post it on the website and we may even read it here on the show.
We want banshee stories from both sides. Yes.
So Jane.
So Vince.
Now that I've read my story, do you have one?
I don't have a story to read today.
You don't?
Mm-mm.
What are you doing then?
Oh, it's a Castle of Spirits story. You want me to read that to you?
We would like that.
Yeah.
Ideally. I mean, if you're free.
Well, I mean, I was gonna. Yeah, I can do it real quick.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Yeah, we'll sit back and.
All right. Well, I'll do it just this one time. My story today is called Hooded Ghost of New Cut Road, and it comes from AM in Wales in the UK, and AM submitted this story in April of 2011.
Wow, right.
I do love me a good hooded specter story. I had almost forgotten about this occurrence and only reminded of it sometime on driving down a particular piece of road, but there seems to be a similar sighting across the UK of large hooded figures. In the early hours of New Year's Day, 1996 to 97, I had finished work in a nightclub and a friend of mine picked me up, probably around 2 a.m. Neither of us had been drinking, and I should point out I reserve judgment on the paranormal. It was a crisp night and was lightly snowing on a bypass called New Cut Road, approximately a 3-mile stretch of road with barriers either side, hilly ground on the oncoming traffic/driver's side, and the passengers consisted of a banking slope and trees further away from the roadside. We were going quite slow on the 60-mile-per-hour stretch. I'm always surprised when it's mile per hour in...
And not kilometers, yeah.
Right. I just had to point that out. Can't be the only American who's surprised whenever we hear miles outside of the U.S. We were going quite slow on the 60-mile-per-hour stretch, possibly 30 to 40 miles or less, and we were around the halfway point on the bypass and had just passed a sign. There were no trees on the passenger side, just a drop and darkness with the moon highlighting the trees. As the sporadic snow fell in the yellow and white lit air, I could see a figure beyond the barriers. It was large, around 7 to 8 feet tall. It appeared hooded with no features, just blackness. I can only compare it to the hooded figure in the film The Frighteners from 1996 and Lord of the Rings 2001, incidentally by the same director. That's right, Peter Jackson. We were big fans of Peter Jackson, way back in the day.
Dead Alive era.
Dead Alive, man. Meet the Feebles.
Bad Taste.
Bad Taste, yep. However, and I know this is a contradiction, the figure was transparent but solid. And while that is a contradiction, Vince, I think I understand exactly what they mean. I can see how something could be, because you think of like fabric that you can see through, right? It's definitely solid, but you can see through it. So I can understand that. A deep and intuitive feeling of dread and fear came over me. a giddy feeling of falling off a bike as a child mixed with a heightened fear of not wanting to go downstairs in the dark. It felt ominous and evil, something I've never felt since, apart from possibly sleep paralysis, where you know you're dreaming but can't wake up out of the dream. I looked to my friend who could see it too. He gave out a yell and put his foot on the accelerator. The car skidded. If I had looked to my left as we passed the figure, I would have come face to face with it. However, for some reason, I turned, looking right over my shoulder to the rear window, looking to the left side back window between the passenger and driver's seat. In retrospect, it may have been to distance myself from the figure and passenger window. The figure, appeared to lunge forward as if to come through the back of the car. We drove on, and as I watched it, it was lost into the darkness. When we stopped the car outside my house, the side of the car had a large film patch over the door and part of the window. It may have already been there, and a coincidence, I can't be sure. But the substance of film looked like a smear on a knife after cutting cheese. I was so scared that I had to wake my family, thinking that I may die that night, and this figure was a warning or a sign of something to come, like a Dickensian tale. Of course, I'm still here. But are you? Just kidding. I couldn't help but think this horrific experience meant something, and we both returned to the area by foot days later, expecting to possibly find a clue, an injured person, or even a dead body. We walked almost the whole length of the road and never found anything. Sometime later, the Times newspaper ran a story on hooded figure sightings, which gave me some credence of the events. A kind of reprieve. And again, that is Hooded Ghost of New Cut Road, submitted by AM in the UK, April of 2011. So it's interesting that they said that it reminded them of the movie The Frighteners, because when I was reading this story and picturing it, Vince, do you know what I pictured?
Phantasm.
No. Is that what you pictured?
Kind of, but just a lot taller.
Yeah, because those were like little Ewok things.
No, they were like Jawas from Star Wars,
Okay.
even though the filming of Phantasm actually took place before the filming of Star Wars, but I digress.
Okay, but Ewoks still had hoods on.
No, they did not.
Yes, they did.
Ewoks were hairy. They're Muppets.
Yeah, but there was a scene where they had hoods on too.
Oh, maybe like, little hoodie things. Mm-hmm. Okay, whatever. Mm-hmm. But it's just a bunch of Muppets.
But what I pictured was that scene in Monty Python's The Meaning of Life with Death, where Death comes to claim all the people who ate
salmon mousse.
Salmon mousse. The salmon mousse.
Might I say that I think that was probably my favorite scene in the whole movie.
It is absolutely my favorite scene.
Not because it was not because it was
Find the
funniest.
Fish is pretty exciting. I do like Find the Fish.
So we got the fish and we got the salmon mousse. So anything,
any part of that movie with fish,
anything
guess.
Aquatic, you're into. I liked it because it was spooky.
It was super creepy. That's the thing about that is they took that hooded figure, and which I always feel is very, English or British or whatever. And they were true to it. They didn't sure, the scene around it was spoofed, but the character itself, the hooded figure, was terrifying. And he was supposed to be death. He was the Grim Reaper. But in this story, AM said that they thought that this was essentially a Grim Reaper type character coming to take them away. So I never want to see that.
Do you think there's what do you think about Grim Reaper stuff?
That's a hard one.
You hear a lot about near-death experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least you have in the last 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of kids having them. Whenever a child has a near-death experience, it's almost something that you take more seriously or you believe in a little bit more because it's not coming from an adult who may have heard about it in a movie or something, or an old Phil Donahue episode. Mm-hmm. Even though kids are like sponges, they could have been listening in the other room.
Yeah.
But anyway,
I don't know.
You don't hear about the hooded death creature being coming for people in these near-death experiences.
Sometimes you do, but not always. So it's not a consistent thing. I don't know. Like I've said in previous episodes, I think I believe in it. In so much as there's a reason that this is a story that has been told for generation upon generation. It comes from somewhere, whether it comes from, Roman, or I think it's Greek mythology, the river Styx, and the imagery of the figure that ferries souls across the river into the afterlife or the underworld. I mean, maybe that's where it comes from. But still, I don't know that that's enough, that story exists, that it has worked its way into people's psyches who have near-death experiences or who have seen that character. I think there's so many other Greek mythological figures that don't make their way into our, paranormal repertoire, but...
Well, that's the thing, is that I think that the image of the hooded figure being death coming to claim your soul, whether it's ferried across a river or you're just whisked away, it's a part of the zeitgeist of the times, right?
Yeah.
These days, we don't have that. That's not something that is it's not really anything that's on our radar anymore.
I don't think that that's true.
But when people have these near-death I've never heard of anybody having a near-death experience and then they said, well, death came to claim me and he was a hooded creature.
Well, maybe that's because people who see death don't have near-death experiences.
They don't come back, in other words.
Right. He's successful at his job. So
you think that maybe beyond the light at the end of the tunnel, he's standing there waiting with a Skype?
I don't know. I don't pretend to know what happens beyond life. I think there's something going on over there, but I don't think that a single person on this planet knows what it is or, has all of the answers. I think there's probably a lot that we don't know, and I'm not ready to discount any of it because I have no frame of reference. I have no evidence either way. So I'm not saying I wholeheartedly believe all of it, but I cannot say that I wholeheartedly don't believe any of it. There's a lot out there, and there's a reason that people have these light at the end of the tunnel experiences and come back. And there's a reason that, the Grim Reaper, the dark hooded figure, is in our paranormal lexicon, but I don't know what that is. And I don't know why some people have the light at the end of the tunnel. Some people have absolutely nothing. Some people see this guy. Some people see, I don't know, probably a row of dogs doing the can. I have no idea.
Hey, if there
Anything
are dogs,
is possible.
If there are dogs, that's how you know it's heaven. When there are dogs there, right? There was a Twilight Zone episode like this. The Twilight Zone episode where there's a guy and his dog.
Yeah.
And they die together.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think the dog had fallen into the water or something had happened to the dog and the guy jumped in after him and they both went. And so after they get out of the water and they're walking around, they kind of come to realize, at least the man comes to realize, hey, I'm not alive anymore, neither of us are.
Mm-hmm. And
he comes to a place and there's a gate there.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a guy telling him, hey, come on in. You're welcome. It's time to move on to the next step, to the next stage. And the guy says, all right, let's go, come on. And the guy stops him and says, wait, there are no dogs allowed. Meanwhile, the dog is like pulling away from this guy. He's like, the dog is suspicious.
You got to go with the dog.
Exactly. And so what does our hero of the story do? He says, if my dog's not welcome here, I'm not going in either.
Yeah.
And he says, come on, let's get out of here.
Yep.
And then they continue on down the road and they come to another place where there's a guy standing there, a very nice, smiling guy, very welcoming. And he says, "Hey, there you are. We've been waiting for you."
Mm-hmm.
And the guy says, "Hey, I was just, I was at the other gate just now, and they turned us away."
Mm-hmm.
And the guy, I guess that would be, I don't know.
At this new gate?
At this new gate, is he St. Peter? Is that what he's supposed to be?
I don't know. I don't know.
But he's very casually dressed gentleman.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, "Oh, no, that was the bad place.
Uh-oh.
You barely escaped by the skin of your teeth."
Well, at least he didn't have to go through an entire season before he figured out that he was in the bad place.
Ted Danson series references.
Spoilers for The Good Place in case anybody hasn't seen the end of episode or season 1.
And so at the end of this episode, the guy at the gate says, "Well, you and your dog are both welcome.
Aww.
Come on in." Now, that was the lesson there was don't go anywhere where they don't allow dogs.
For reals. Yeah. Yep. I'm into it.
Cats?
Cats are, yeah, I'm pretty sure cats get to go to the other place.
The good place or the bad place?
The bad place, I say with a black cat on my lap. Huh, Mr. Moon? Let's see. Do you have something to say about that?
He walks around the house all night.
Screaming. At the top
yowling.
Of his lungs.
Sometimes it sounds like he's saying hello.
Oh, yeah, very often. Hello?
But when you put the microphone up to him, he doesn't say a word.
Nothing. Not a peep.
You're ruining it for us, Cat.
So we actually have a couple of correspondence from some of our listeners.
Oh.
We have not read any of them yet because our last episode obviously was the Ouija board special, and so we read all the Ouija board ones. But we have one here from somebody calling themselves the Maritimer, and they say in episode 8. You asked, what kind of a ghost would you come back as? And just real quick, I think that this message from the Maritimer is perfectly placed tonight because you and I each read a ghost story with different types of ghosts. You had the Banshee, I have the hooded figure. So here's another one. You asked, what kind of a ghost would you come back as? I'm going to be a world-traveling ghost, visiting all the places on my bucket list. I'll stay just long enough for people to notice me and then leave for another adventure. Oh, the fun, chaos, and confusion I'll cause. And I love that. I think that that's so much fun. Just you get to see all of the places on your list, scare the hell out of people, and move along. And I think that you could go for hundreds and hundreds of years without ever getting bored of that.
Well, there is the appeal kind of eternal life, which is, kind of reflected back to us in vampire stories.
Mm-hmm.
I think everybody at some point has thought, maybe it would be kind of cool to be a vampire. You live at night, you don't have to work. You don't have to worry about what you're going to eat for dinner because it's already there.
I'm not on Team Vampire.
You're not?
Mm-mm. Do you remember in the movie, not in the TV series, movie What We Do in the Shadows?
Mm-hmm.
My favorite food, I can't eat chips. I mean, you got to remember
Nick.
that. What's your favorite food that you're not going to be able to have?
Pizza.
Exactly. And we saw the pizza pie in What We Do in the Shadows TV series when the Baron ate the pizza pie and then barfed all over the place.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I'm not into the vampire thing. And honestly, I don't want to live forever. But the idea of being a ghost, being able to do your thing, that sounds pretty legit.
But can you eat if you're a ghost? I guess you could
you're
eat.
not sucking blood exclusively.
True.
So
better to be a ghost than a vampire.
I'm into that more. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think there's fewer rules around your existence as a ghost than there are, as a vampire.
There is always the risk that you could run into the wrong person who's in the mood for an exorcism, and then you get banished to some place where you don't want to go, and then, there you are.
So we have another message here in the lounge from Hugh, and Hugh says, hello, having known one of the ghost keepers all my life. Oh, Do you know anyone named Hugh?
I can't say that I do.
I don't
But
either.
I'm beginning to think that this might be a nom de plume of someone
I think it
I am
is.
familiar with.
Having known one of the ghost keepers all my life, I have noticed that they seem to be more drawn towards ghostly experiences versus other subjects under the paranormal umbrella. What draws you more towards believing or wanting to believe in apparitions versus other supernatural niches?
Okay, well, if this is a person that I have known all their life,
Yes.
they may not have been paying attention because I remember I loaned him a book called The UFO Incident.
Yeah, he doesn't know you as well as he thinks he does, huh? Because I would even say, no. Vince is much more a UFO guy than a ghost guy. I would say you're probably UFO, then ghost, then Bigfoot.
They're definitely my top 3.
Mm-hmm.
I used to have a fascination with the Loch Ness Monster when I was a kid,
Me too. I still do.
but not so much anymore
That's unfortunate.
because there have been so many attempts to capture that thing on film. There have been like the sonar and all that stuff. There was the incident at Loch Ness with Werner Herzog.
You know that was a fiction movie, right? That wasn't a real documentary.
No, it was real.
It wasn't real.
I'm pretty sure it was real.
It wasn't real, but it was a fabulous movie. And remind me, Vince, and I'll put it in the attic. So castleofspirits.com/attic is where we list all of the books, music, movies, etc. that we recommend. And I'll put a link to Incident at Loch Ness there. So if you've never seen that, you really need to do yourself a favor and see it.
But back to Hugh's question. What was the question again?
Why do you believe in ghosts more than other things?
I don't know that I necessarily do believe in ghosts more than anything else.
Same. They're more exciting to me than anything else, but I think I'm open to all of it.
I have to say that I have seen more convincing evidence of other things, of UFOs and cryptids, than I have of the existence of ghosts. Yet still I have a problem believing in everything wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
And that's because I think at some point in my life, I got knocked in the head and I thought, maybe there's no explanation for anything.
Yeah.
Maybe there is no way to prove anything. Maybe everything is subjective experience. And if I go outside tomorrow and I see something hovering in the sky over the castle and nobody else sees it, was it really there?
Does that invalidate your experience?
Right.
Because nobody else saw it. Right. Yeah.
And I think it's entirely possible to see things that nobody else sees.
Yeah.
But I think it's entirely possible also to see things that aren't there. If we can trigger...
And to not see things that are there.
Right. If we can trigger hallucinations with drugs, then who's to say that we can't trigger hallucinations by accident without drugs?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a good question, though. What about you?
I don't know. I think that there's something darkly romantic about ghosts. And what I wouldn't give to have incontrovertible, an experience that I just absolutely could not put down to a trick of the light. I was tired. It could have been this. It could have been that. What I wouldn't give to have that experience where I'm like, it was straight up a ghost. And I looked that thing in the eye and it looked me in the eye and I caught it on tape or whatever. To be scared out of my skin by a ghost, I would give pretty much anything at this point. To see a UFO, I mean, I wouldn't turn it down, but the idea just isn't as exciting to me.
I think a UFO would be more terrifying.
I don't know.
Because you don't know what they're going to do to you. I mean,
you don't know what a ghost is going to do to you.
What can a ghost do to you? It can't kill you.
We don't really know.
And if it does kill you, you become a ghost too, and there's that.
Right, and then you get your vengeance because now you're on equal playing field with that ghost who just murdered you.
Now we're getting into Patrick Swayze territory here.
It's autumn sunrise. Anyway,
Orlando?
Is that you? Oh, that's my favorite scene in the whole movie. Anyway, so yeah, I'm not gonna turn my nose up at any of the paranormal stuff because, like I said earlier, I don't know what's out there and I can't prove that something is or isn't out there. And until then, I'm not going to say wholeheartedly yes, wholeheartedly no. But I do have wholeheartedly, I want so badly to believe in this thing. I want this thing to be true. Simply because like I said, I love the kind of the dark romance around the idea of ghosts and hauntings. And
therefore, there's your answer. It's because your uncle is romantic.
Thanks, Hugh. We do have a couple of emails too. What? We have emails. Do you want to read them? We have 2 emails.
Yeah.
Oh man, let's see. All right. So we have an email by, the Maritimer again. And she says, in episode 4, when you guys were discussing doppelgangers and dimensional stuff / time warps, I thought, what if all those times when you stare off into space and you totally zone out, your spirit is actually off haunting a different location? Ooh, that's a really cool idea. I don't hate that.
No, I love it. It reminds me of, and we kind of alluded to this a few episodes ago. I don't remember when we asked the question, do you really have to even be dead to haunt something?
Yes.
The phenomenon of doppelgangers it's not just somebody who looks like you, who's living their life somewhere else. It's sort of like the evil twin scenario.
Yeah.
About somebody who shows up somewhere and interacts with people who know you, but behaves strangely or does something dastardly in a certain, in a way, and causes problems for you. And then you think that maybe there's some sort of tear in the space-time continuum. That scares me.
She also goes on to say, in episode 5, you were discussing whether immersing yourself into the paranormal opened you up for more experiences. While I don't subscribe to the notion that watching or hearing true paranormal stories can invite those exact happenings into your own home, I've heard a lot of people who say they do believe. Who am I to tell someone what their personal reality should be? Same. That's pretty much what I'm saying. Just because, like you said, Vince, if I see it and no one else does that invalidate the experience? I do, however, believe that being open-minded to the possibility makes you more open in general. I have a problem with that personally because I've heard that so much. Well, if you're open to the experiences, it's more likely to happen for you. I have been in situations, numerous situations throughout my life where I have essentially begged, verbally, out loud, begged for an occurrence. Like I said, I used to do ghost hunting and I have wanted nothing more than, like I said, to see that ghost and have no doubt. And my actual ghostly experiences that I feel like don't really have an explanation are very few, very, very few. So...
But you've had some.
I mean, I've had some experiences that I'm like, it was freaky and I can't really explain it, but that doesn't mean there's not an explanation.
Okay, what about the light, the phantom light that you told me about? I think you need to tell that story.
The phantom light.
And meanwhile, Mr. Moon, the
Mr.
cat,
Moon is just walking through the castle screaming because that's what he does. So this is one of my ghost experience, well, quote unquote ghost experiences. And I was ghost hunting with the group that I used to go with in the late 90s, early 2000s. And we were at this cemetery that we used to always go to. It was, I'm just going to kind of give you the broad strokes here. The sun was going down it wasn't like you couldn't see the sun in the sky anymore, but the sky was still bluish. It was still daylight. And we were a large group. Half of us were on one half of the cemetery. Half of us were on the other half of the cemetery. And the group I was with, we noticed that the group on the other half of the cemetery, they were kind of huddled around something. Like they were looking at something. Something interesting was happening. So we went over to them and they said, there's a little light. There's this tiny little light flying around and we're trying to figure out what it is. And I kind of rolled my eyes. I was like, yeah, right.
You talking about like an orb or something?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was picturing. And I was like, yeah, right. There's a little light. You know, I never see anything, so I'm completely skeptical. Well, pretty soon this little light pops up and it's flying around and it is not an orb and it is daylight still, like daylight enough. And it kind of looked like, it wasn't like a firefly. It wasn't faint. It wasn't pulsing. It wasn't greenish yellow. It looked like a little white Christmas light. Like, you know, the little twinkle lights, the white Christmas tree lights, it kind of looked like that. And it would like float around in the air and it was right here in front of us. I remember at one point I put my hand out, palm up in front of me, and it flew across my palm. So right there in front of my face.
Did you feel anything when it did that?
No, I didn't feel anything. I didn't hear anything.
Could you visually see mass, or is it possible?
It was just light. It was just this little tiny. It was. Imagine seeing like one of those little tiny white Christmas twinkle lights.
Yeah.
You know, like 2 feet from your face, and you can see that, but you can see the outline of the bulb, right?
Right.
Okay, so all of that, except there was no outline of the bulb. It was just the light. There was no. It was, like I said, it was daylight. If it were a bug, I would have seen the bug that the light was coming off of. But there was nothing. It was just the light.
Okay, could it have been somebody with a laser pointer?
No. No, laser pointer's red, and it is on... You know, it doesn't show up in the air. It shows up on a surface. And this was in the air. We watched it. It would fly around in front of us and kind of loop through the air. And then it would go down to the grass and disappear. And one of the guys who we were with, he would, whenever it would go down into the grass, he'd throw himself down onto the ground, wrap his arms around his head, right? So he's creating this like little containment right there in front of his face. He'd have a flashlight and he was down there like really scrutinizing in the grass where this little light went. And then like 3 feet away from him, pop, it would pop back up and fly around again. And I remember there was a photo that was taken while we were there. It was actually a photo of my butt. Because the little light was flying past my butt. And yeah, it was not like, I wish I had that photo still. It was not an orb. It was just a little light. They actually had some video footage of it. This has been so many years, and I'm not even in contact with those people anymore who would have that footage. So I wish I could get it. But they said they took it to the university here in town and had the entomologist up there look at it. And they said, well, first of all, up here in northern Utah, there are no self-illuminating insects. And even if there were, this isn't what they look like. They don't have this long, steady glow that's this bright white. It's kind of dull, kind of green. It kind of pulses. And this thing was not like that at all. So.
Yeah, I've seen fireflies.
And I've never seen fireflies except on TV. And what I've seen, it was not what we saw that day. Like I said, my hand in front of my face, it flew right over the surface of my hand. It was still daylight enough that if it were a bug, I would have been like, oh, guys, that's a bug. If there were a mosquito, I would have seen a mosquito in this daylight. So if it were a bug big enough to make that size of an illumination, I would have seen the bug.
So then what happened? Did it just go away?
Yeah, we watched it for a while and then we didn't see it anymore. And I guess it was spotted again by the group one time when I wasn't there. But
so what do you think that was? I mean,
don't know.
A spirit?
Maybe.
And why? I've always wondered this question. Why would a spirit? I know it's the natural place to go to a graveyard to try and communicate with the dead because that's where they're buried. But if you were a spirit, would you necessarily hang out at your grave?
No, but that doesn't mean that there's not a reason for that. You know, it's possible that people are, because people are people, right? Whether you're a spirit or you're a physical person, you're still a people. And people get confused and people get disoriented. And especially, I think that death is probably a place where there's a big potential for some serious disorientation. You know, if you're potentially like mentally out of it or unaware, or it happens suddenly, you may not have any idea what happened or what to do or any of that stuff.
Seriously, that is I think that has to be the most terrifying thing I can think of.
Of course, it's
to think
scary.
That, because, when you're in trouble, you want to think that you can get some help. But if you're dead and you don't know that you're dead, you can't get help and nobody can help you. And so the concept of crossing over in a confused, disoriented state and not realizing what's happening, maybe that could explain all hauntings, or at least a big percentage of them.
And maybe what we're perceiving as a haunting, as a conscious entity hanging around in a cemetery, maybe it's not. It could just be like residual energy wafting off of no, I guess waft is kind of a gross word to use, but wafting off of the bodies and the grounds, right? Like there's no actual consciousness there, but energy is energy, and energy doesn't just stop or disappear. It has to go somewhere. So it's possible that it's not actually like a spirit, a person who's haunting a cemetery, but just kind of this, dissipating energy from the body that's taking memories with it or whatever. Because, I've had experiences in cemeteries, and I'll talk about them as we go. I don't want to just sit and bore you with all of my cemetery experiences in one episode, but I have other experiences in that exact cemetery, in fact, where you're like, okay, but there could be a person behind that, but that sound never happened in this cemetery.
You're talking about EVP.
Yeah. So some EVPs that we got. And if that sound never happened in that cemetery, and this is based on an actual story that I'll tell at some point, if that sound never happened in that cemetery, then that can't be a person haunting the place saying, oh, I've got to make this sound because it's a sound that I make. It's got to be some kind of an energy dissipating thing, a memory, an experience, something that was, full of emotion or just very charged energy for the person that it's coming off of. Anyway, I don't know if that makes any sense, but...
Well, it makes about as much sense as anything else.
All right. So, Vince.
Jane.
Do you have anything else that you'd like to share with our dear, dear listeners before we head off into the darkness?
I do, in fact.
Ooh.
This actually ties into our last episode.
Oh, yeah?
The previous episode, the Ouija board special. A headline dated yesterday: school students in Colombia collapse after trying to contact the dead using a Ouija board.
Oh.
11 children in Colombia were found passed out in the school corridor after playing a Ouija board game.
Wow. That escalated very quickly.
The students, aged 13 to 17, were found by teachers at the Agricultural Technical Institute in Hato. 5 of the teenagers were taken to the hospital while the rest were treated at a nearby health center.
Wow.
They were suffering from abdominal pains, muscle spasms, and extreme vomiting.
Wow.
Doctors have said in medical reports that they suffered from food poisoning. Now, you're not supposed to eat the Ouija board, guys.
Salmon Mousse.
The rectory of the school is awaiting more details before ruling on the incident. The mayor of the town said that when the kids were found, they were short of breath and thick drool was coming out of their mouths.
Ew.
Gross. It is not ruled out that it was the Ouija board. That is part of the investigation, he said.
I think that a couple of things could be at play there. It's possible that they had, we don't know what they had for lunch. Maybe they all ate the same thing and, got themselves a little case of food poisoning, and it just so happened to be on Ouija board day. And, a little amped up anxiety.
Adolescent hormones.
Yeah. And food poisoning and...
Bad combination.
Right. It really is. It really is.
Well, it's a good thing they weren't playing checkers. Otherwise, then checkers would become
checkers are
demonized.
haunted, man.
But of
Don't
course,
play with checkers. You're inviting evil into your life.
but who plays with checkers anymore anyway?
I like checkers. Don't hate on check. What's the matter?
I'm sorry. I didn't know I was treading on
Checkered water.
On checkered. So that brings to a close our news segment of the weird.
It does? The weird? What?
That was pretty weird, I thought.
Is that a new segment? Okay.
No.
No.
Not anymore.
Oh, don't make me feel like that.
I guess it could be.
I don't know that that was any weirder than anything else we read.
Oh. Do you hear that music?
What? No, I don't hear anything.
Oh,
that music.
Okay.
I thought that was your stomach rumbling.
I wanted to introduce this piece of music because several episodes back, I was rummaging through the Castle of Spirits, old boxes in the attic and in the basement and all kinds of crazy things. And
25 years worth of stuff.
And surprisingly, not a lot of cobwebs.
Wow.
Thankfully.
That's unfortunate.
The previous groundskeeper did a very good job of keeping things clean. One of the things I found was a MIDI file of a piece of music that used to play on this website some 20 years ago.
Yeah, we've played that before.
We did, and we weren't able to identify that piece of music. However, I did come across yet another piece of music.
I thought this one sounded different.
This one is called Dollhouse.
Ooh. Dolls are just creepy, in a good way. I do like a creepy doll.
This piece of music is equally creepy in that equally good way. And I thought we'd maybe just play out with this piece because it's pretty, as you can tell, it's pretty scary.
It is pretty creepy. And we're actually recording this much later in the evening than we usually do. So I'll be taking this piece of music to bed with me. So thanks in advance for the nightmares, Vince.
You are quite welcome, Jane. And with that, we bring to a close another episode of the Castle of Spirits podcast. Thank you for listening. Please visit the website, castleofspirits.com.
And while you're there, please submit your stories. We all have one. Yes, your story is good enough. Yes, you're a good enough writer. Please go to castleofspirits.com/submit and tell the world your story. And if you have any questions, comments, emotional outbursts about anything we said on today's episode, head to castleofspirits.com/lounge and hit us with your best paranormal shot.
A little bit of Pat Benatar there. And if you like this podcast, tell a friend. If you hate it, tell an enemy.
Tell 2 enemies.
Hey, whatever works, right? And so in closing, we remind you to
stay scared, my friends.